the changes, how this thought changes, right? From the classic, and then they usually don't put the name new classic. Or some may put new, but usually in economics, they put the word NEO, neoclassic. Neoclassic means new classic. So what does it mean, new classic? The old classic school may have some criticism here and there, especially from the Keynesian school, right? So then respond to the criticism, they try to modify or so-called enhance their weaknesses in their thought. Then they come up with slightly different, but the base, the fundamental is still the same. Otherwise, you will not call classic school, right? Or say economics. So the fundamental is still the same. They go for free market, less government intervention, but you notice that there are some changes from classic to new classic, or more technically they call neoclassic, right? This is what in the assignment you should do, and to search like Keynesian, you put neo-Keynesian, right? Imperialism, you might want to put neo-imperialism, right? Marxism, you might want to put neo-Marxism, and try. So the word neo here means new, right? So neo-classicism imply a new form of classicism. The neo-classicism economy were marginalist. In a crucial sense, they are emphasized on decision making and price elimination, right? They also mostly they are dominated with marginalists. Marginalists in your micro, you study all these marginal product, right? Marginal productivity of labor. Marginal mean what? Marginal means small amount of changes, right? Mathematically, you may represent by a triangle, by a dy dx, or delta y delta x. All are same marginal, just depend on your change in 1 unit, or very small unit, or extremely small unit, right? So the marginalist. Then there are 3 differences between early marginalist and later classic. So in short, difference between classic and neoclassic, there are 3 major differences. 1, neoclassic thought, right, especially Alfred Marshall, stressed both demand and supply in determining the market price. In a classic, they are more focused on the demand side alone only, right? But in neoclassic, they focus on both. Second one is even more glaring differences. Several of the neoclassic economy, for example, Fisher, took a far greater interest in the role of money, right, in the economy than the early marginalists, the early classic school. Here, sometimes you have to be careful, because the monetary school, some are actually associated with neoclassic. I mean, of the neoclassicism, still free market, but here the role of money given more emphasis, more important. But some textbook or some journals, some research, and some researcher was claim that this thought actually stand alone as a so-called monetary school, right? Some will just say that monetary school is just part of the neoclassic school. Just like the development school, economic development school, or the economic development subject, some may claim that it's actually an extension of the Keynesian school of thought, but some may think that it's actually a new branch, a new standalone branch of the economic school. Right? So it's like that. The third one, neoclassic economic extend the marginal analysis to the market structure other than pure competition. If you see the very traditional classic school, they assume competition, pure competition, and the role of competition is very important. To assume that, right? You notice the capitalist, right, want to maximize profit, the worker want to maximize wages, the consumer want to maximize quality or consumption utility. So everyone to maximize their own interest, but how the economy, the market actually can come out with a social goods through fair competition. And in this case, fair competition are assumed. And of course, Keynesian and other schools, they are criticizing that this fair competition in theory can be achieved, but in practical it may not. Therefore, the neoclassic economists, the neoclassic in this case, they take into this consideration, analyze the market structure other than the pure competition or pure monopoly. So among that, the thinker of the theories are imperfect competition. They start to have this so-called imperfect competition. Therefore, you have more on this analysis on oligopoly. You got different type of oligopoly market, and then imperfect market, imperfect information, asymmetric information, lemon market, and all these more are neoclassic school, right? imperfect competition is the point. But we don't go through that one. We go this one and just Fisher only for this subject. Okay. As usual, a bit background on Alfred Marshall. He attended the Cambridge School. Then he devoted himself to mathematics, physics, and later economics. So you see some of the very well-known famous economists, including the current one that win the Nobel Prize, they themselves are really, sometimes they're not 100% pure economics field. They're mathematics, physics, or even other things, chemistry. Right? This was aided by the well-to-do uncle, his father simply being too poor to pay for the situation. So his father is very poor, so he was supported by uncle. And you notice some of these very well-known academicians like Luxembourg, Karl Marx, they don't have an easy life. But at the end, their contribution to the world, whether you like it or not, is very influential, right? Many people criticize Karl Marx, but his contribution cannot be ignored, cannot be deleted. We never heard of Karl Marx before, but you see, so some of these people, they have a very harsh life. So when you have a harsh life, so you think of these people, right? Then they still can achieve great thing, and the world actually will remember them, and you have to study them. His principle of economic gradually become replaced by new principle of political economy. Then, so you see, Marshall was a great synthesizer, seeking to combine the best of classic economics with the marginalist thinking and producing a neoclassic economics. Right? So he's among the pioneer for neoclassic economics. Now, we studied some of his theory, right? You have already very familiar before, but you might not know that it's actually from the Marshall, right? Not really he started, but he already improved it. Utility theory and demand. The previous thinker of economics before him, right? Menger, Wallace, Marshall formulate a notion of diminishing marginal utility as well as the necessary condition for consumer utility maximization through exchange. Right? Neither these Jones or Menger's success indirectly link their utility theory with the other. Previous one, usually they just develop utility theory, but Marshall actually they link the utility theory with the demand theory later on. Why? Because they put the money together linked with the utility. While Marshall has shown such a link, Wallace has shown such a link, Marshall had much more successful than Wallace in the rigorous dividing contemporary neoclassic conclusion on a demand theory from his notion of diminishing marginal utility. Actually, if you study the demand curve, law of demand from your very first few chapter on your very basic microeconomic or economic theory, you should have learned that like law of demand, when you know that when law of demand, when price drop, quantity demanded increase, right? So it's a negative relationship. So price drop, own price drop, the quantity demanded increase. Just like when you have mega sales, you want to buy more. Assume that it's an all product, but have you ever asked why price drop you have to buy more, right? So this is, if you can answer this question based on utility theory. Okay? So Marshall claimed demand is based on the law of diminishing marginal utility. Marshall introduced two important qualifications at this point. Marshall introduced two important. Okay? First, he was concerned with a moment in time which is too short an interval to consider any change in character or taste. Second, he concerned consumer food are indivisible. Small quantity of commodity may be insufficient to meet a certain specific one, and then there will be more than a proportionate increase. So this one just quantification, right? A utility approach of the Marshallian system dealt with the pressure and pain. Pressure and pain is a very important philosophy. You may learn it if you study social science, right? But here we just assume he used this concept, right? Desire to aspiration and incentive to action. How can we measure the utility of such intangible? Right? How do you measure? You say you are happy. How do you measure happy? I like to eat this food. Right? Then how do you measure your like? Right? And so Marshall say with money. Right? By assuming a fixed marginal utility of money, Marshall found a connection link between utility schedule and price schedule. So if you measure the utility, like how much you like for this food, I like it 100 unit or 100 ringgit. So you can measure, if you use your money to measure, then you can put in a schedule price, therefore come up with a demand curve, right? For example, if a person has a marginal utility of 2 util for 1 ringgit of money, then 1 additional loaf of bread would yield 4 util, while 1 additional pound of stick would yield 6 util, so that the person would be willing to give out 2 ringgit. Right? So you connect the util with money. So if $1 you can is equal to 2 util, so $2 must be 4 util, otherwise they will not pay. Right? From this, Marshall derived the individual demand curve. So because he linked the money with the utility, then he can demand the demand curve. The total demand curve for any commodity was simply a summation of individual demand curve. Same like this one is like what you study in a micro. Right? Then elasticity of demand. Tell us whether the diminishing of desire or the marginal utility is slow or rapid in the quantity. So this one is also developed by the Marshall, and supply. See, Marshall is governed by cost of production. Marshall conceives supply is not a point or single amount, but rather a curve. For purpose of exposure, Marshall divide them into 3 periods: immediate, short run, and long run. Right? Wait. Okay. Wait. Market price refer to the immediate present. I mean current price, with no time allowed for adaptation of the quantity supplied to change in demand. So you have an immediate, right? In the short run, he divided the cost into 2 types, what he calls supplementary cost and a prime cost. So supplementary costs are now known as fixed costs. Prime costs are known as variable costs. So in short run, you have fixed cost and variable costs, right? In your micro one, or even in your QT one also, I think got this one. Or micro one, not in micro one. But in the long run, all costs are variable, and they must all be covered if the firm is to be continued in business. Therefore, your microeconomic theory tell you that if you are losing money in the short run, it's okay if you can cover all your fixed costs and you got extra to cover part of your variable cost, so you can continue, or indeed you should continue operation, because if you close shop, you have to pay the fixed cost, right? If you can cover all your variable costs, you can cover all your variable costs and part of the fixed cost, then if you continue, you pay only part of the fixed cost. If you shut down, you pay full fixed cost. But in the long run, if you cannot cover, then you should shut down, right? So if the price rise such that total revenue exceed total cost of the production, capital will enter the industry, typically through new firm, right? Enter an exceed condition, market supply will increase, the entire supply curve will shift to the right. So you will see this one. And okay, in this case, right, long run and short run, just a simple diversion. If people ask, how long is long run? I think, has anyone asked you this question? How long is long run? How short is short run? So based on this concept, there's no time frame here. It's just on how the costs can be variable. If 5 years, the every cost can be changed to, this is 5 years is the long run. If you are a magician or you are Harry Potter, you can change everything in 1 second. So 1 second is a long run, right? So long run and short run concept by Alfred Marshall. Equilibrium price and quantity, right? What determine the market price? In the classic economics, you say cost of production. Remember the classic economics, the LMC and the David Ricardo, meaning objective, labor time, cost, the sacrifice of attendance. But of course, the classic school of thought also say that in short run, right, may be fluctuated around the actual price, the natural price, right, due to supply and demand, right? So demand is the early marginalist, right? So, but Marshall said that both supply and demand are important in determining the market price, right? Behind the demand lie the utility and diminishing marginality. Perhaps the last sentence will be a more significant contribution right? He link the demand curve or link the price, the monetary part of the demand curve, right, to the utility, and therefore explain why, like explain the law of demand, why you want to buy more when the price drop, right? Or why demand curve is stopping down or stopping up. Yeah, the distribution of income, he also contribute to the theory on the income and wages. Right? Then we choose some. The distribution of income in a competitive economy is determined by the pricing of the factor of production. Entrepreneur will employ each production input up to the margin that its net product would no longer exceed the price they would have to pay. So, which are not determined by the marginal productivity of labor alone. Okay, here marginal productivity is basis for the demand for labor, which is the direct demand depending on the demand for consumer or the final good. If you are studying micro 2, you tend to see that wages equal to marginal productivity of labor, then that is an equilibrium wages, right? Of course, later on you'll see Keynesian economy actually also criticized this micro 2, and in this Marshall Neoclassic say that yes, marginal productivity of labor do determine the wages, but they are not alone, right? Marginal productivity is the basis for demand of labor, but which is also a direct demand. If your consumer didn't want to buy, let's say, wages to produce handphone, if no one want to buy handphone anymore, right, or demand for handphone drop, then will you demand labor to produce handphone? No. So even though the marginal productivity of labor it can equal to the wages, but you will not demand for labor, so it's a direct demand. So marginal productivity of labor equals to wages for your equilibrium in your micro 2 and normal microeconomic subject. Correct, but not 100% correct. Okay? Not, but it depends on which school of thought lah. You see a classic school, neoclassic school, or Keynesian school. Okay? But wages depend on both demand and supply of labor. So the wages in this case, they depend not only this one, also depend on the supply of labor. Right? If the supply of labor is very, very little, like for example, currently you notice because of MCO, COVID, then many other things, right? Foreign labor cannot come into Malaysia, so there's a labor shortage. So if labor shortage, then you have no choice. Supply and demand of labor. You know that when labor shortage, you want to hire more labor, you have to induce them from other company. You have to pay higher wages, right? Higher compensation. So not only determined by marginal productivity, but also the supply of labor. If the labor supply increase, then other thing remain constant, the marginal productivity of labor will fall. Labor supply curve will take a cut the labor demand curve further down. So you'll notice that Marshall analysis will be more comprehensive. Okay? Again, and we have this school called derived demand. Right? We won't go into detail, but just have a briefly idea of this one. Okay, Marshall not only correctly identified the demand for labor as derived demand, but also discuss the determinant of the wages elasticity of the labor. Right? This one Pigo is another economist later summarized this Marshall 4 law of derived demand. In modern terms, these laws are as follow. Marshall 4 law of derived demand. Again, derived demand means this demand is derived from somewhere. From where? From the demand of the goods they produce. If the labor to produce mineral water, so you won't demand for labor to produce mineral water unless there is a demand for the mineral water itself. So it's a derived demand. Yeah. Other thing being equal, the greater the substitutability of other factor for labor, the greater will be the elasticity demand for labor. Elasticity, you know that is a higher elasticity, greater elasticity means changes is bigger. For example, in some circumstances, robotic machinery can be readily substituted for labor, which rate increase therefore will produce a disproportionate decline in the employment. For example, if now you go to the restaurant, you can see kiosk, right? Automatic kiosk machine, or sometimes robotic robot, or you go to some sushi restaurant, you have this so-called, you call it real They send the food to you, and then you take, and then you press the button, then the trolley will go back themselves. So if machinery can easily and of course cheaply, or at least comparably cost to replace the labor, then if labor wages increase, people will want to substitute labor with machine. So elasticity or demand for labor will be very high. Other thing being equal, second, the other thing being equal, the greater the price elasticity of product demand, the greater will be the elasticity of labor demand. Right? Supposedly, for example, the product demand is elastic, restaurant meal, and the wages rise. Right? This will increase the cost of production and raise the product price. So the higher the product price will be met with substantial decline in purchase, thus necessitating the equal substantial decline in the number of workers hired. So what does it mean? If wages price increase, you have to, unless you absorb the extra cost, if you channel back this extra cost to the price, I mean price cost of production increase because of wages increase, you have to increase your, let's say your restaurant, you increase your food price, and if food price is great, very elastic, so you lost a lot of customer, so you don't have business. So you don't have business, then you will not demand for labor. You will fire some of the worker as cook lah, waitress lah, waiter, cashier. You'll fire them a lot, or at least you won't hire them. So therefore, other thing being equal, the greater the price elasticity of the product demand, the greater will be the elasticity of the labor demand. It means slightly increase in the wages cause your price to increase slightly, but the demand for the product drop dramatically. So therefore, you don't need so much labor. You will get rid of some of the labor dramatically. Okay. Third, again, other thing being equal, you see in the economics, they have this so-called other thing being equal ceteris paribus, right? So, economic model, sometimes you cannot capture everything, right? You will just only focus on the main thing that you need, and of course, plus the control variable, right? So, other thing being equal, the larger the proportion of total production cost account for labor, the greater will be the elasticity of labor demand. Right? Why? For example, where labor costs are 100% of total cost, that means your total cost is 100%, which increase of 20% will increase the total cost by 20%. Right? But if your labor costs are only 10% of the total cost, the same 20% increase in the wages will only result in 2%. Right? So you see, if your proportion of labor is higher, then you will tend to, your total overall cost will increase much higher, so therefore will cause the greater elasticity. Other thing being equal, the greater the elasticity of supply of other input, the greater the elasticity demand of labor. So to illustrate this one, let's suppose the wages rate in a certain industry rise, and that this prompt an attempt to substitute capital for labor, right? So this increase the demand for capital, drive up the price, and thus retarded the substitution process. The answer is yes, right? If the supply of capital is highly elastic, but no if it's highly inelastic. So the wage elasticity of the labor demand will be greater when the supply of capital is elastic, and when the supply is elastic. So you think about this one. Okay. Okay. Just now the first part you see here, they got three main changes from Neoclassic to Classic. The first one is the effort marshal, right? The second one will be the role of money or the monetary aspect, right? Classic school didn't pay much attention to the monetary aspect, but Neoclassic school, especially Fisher, they do focus more on the role of money. As mentioned before, sometimes this role of money or the monetary aspect, they can be taken as a stand-alone school in the monetary school, but some of them actually equal it as a part of the Neoclassic school. So the monetary economics, the classic and the Massey school of the early marginists regard money merely as a wheel. I mean, just like something not important. They must be put aside. I mean, they just block your view only. You have to put it aside to examine the real world. They felt that money and prices are subordinate to more basic economic factor. Right? Others, such as Wicks and Keynes, combine monetary analysis with their study of fundamental economic process. Even though later you study Keynesian economic, usually Keynesian economic with the fiscal policy, growth of government expenditure and tax, but Keynesian economic do also touch on monetary policy, but Keynes himself actually say that monetary policy may not be that efficient due to some of the constraints. Therefore, usually associate Keynes with the government fiscal policy only. Right? So money in economic theory was destined to increase the importance over the years, right? Like now you have banking, not only banking, you have shadow banking, or in some context, some people also consider virtual banking, and this cryptocurrency is another new innovation of the banking and finance system. So banking, credit, economic fluctuation as an increasingly important monetary policy of the central bank, right? Then Marshall devoted some attention to the monetary analysis itself. He did a version of a so-called Cambridge equation, M equals to KPT. M is the money stock, right, and transaction. And then K is a fraction of the income that people constantly wish to hold. K is usually assumed to be constant, especially in short and medium term. Fisher developed the more familiar equation of exchange, so it's MV equals to PT, right? So if you compare these two equations, you'll notice that MM, PT, TT, just the V and the K is different. So V in this case is just 1 divided by K, or 1 over K. Right? The monetary economics of the Neoclassic school differ noticeably from the non-monetarists in the same school, because the monetary theorists had to deal with aggregative analysis such as total demand, total money supply, total saving, and total investment. Right? Okay. One of the pioneer or the most influential person in this so-called neoclassic monetary aspect is Irving Fisher. Right? So, Irving Fisher was a mathematician turned economics. You see, usually they are not pure economics or start with economics, they are mathematician and then become economics. Then, in addition to this vast written output of economics, he published several highly successful mathematical textbooks as well. Right? He suffered from tuberculosis as a young man. He turned to diet or health, fat and cultivation. You see, some of these very, very famous person really don't have a good life. And they have a not so good life, but at the end, they are a very important person to the whole world. Then he turned to his interest also in his life. He writes several popular book on how to healthy living. So besides writing economic and mathematics book, he also writes several book, right? Healthy book, on health. Right? He advocate anti-tobacco, anti-recall. Long before World War I, he proposed a League of Nations to preserve peace, right? Then later on, you have this so-called maybe NATO and then United Nations. So he invented many mechanical gadgets. One of it is very successful and he served a lot of $1 million for this invention. $1 million in 1870 to 19 something, early 19 something, right? Is a lot compared to now. It's not much because inflation. The fortune he and his wife possessed, which grew about 9 million, was lost in the stock market crash. Right? Okay. Now, one of his greatest theory for neoclassic economy in terms of monetary, right, will be quantity theory of money. The equation of exchange MV equal to P3, where M is the money stock, V is the velocity of circulation, P is the general price level, and P is the volume trade or the real income. So Fisher restate and amplified the old quantity theory of money based on his version of equation of exchange. Original like that, so he add on this part, prime, right? What is this part? Where M prime is a quantity of demand deposit, and V is a velocity of circulation. So for demand deposit, right? So keep price very directly with the quantity of money. So here you can see add one more here. Actually, can we refer to your definition of money? You have M1, M2, and M3. right? So usually last time you just use M1, but he will extend to M2. But of course, now this theory can be debatable. If you have so-called cryptocurrency, you can have so-called other thing, right? This cryptocurrency may be in somehow or some form, right? It can substitute actual currency, actual money, right? So is it considered as a money supply? Then it's up to a future debate. Perhaps you may want to take this issue in final year project research as well, right? Money. So taking V and T as constant, especially in a short run. So in this case, if V and T is constant, right? And the relationship between price and the quantity of money constitute the quantity theory of money. So MVPT, of course, the money supply and the demand deposit, right? You take the V and the T constant, so only left MMP. So money's quantity of money direct relationship with the price. What is the implication? Monetary policy implication. Fisher monetary view is strictly controlling the quantity of money to stabilize the price, because if you take away the T, take away the V, you only left M and P. So if quantity of money increase, the price increased. Price in this case is a general price. So if the general price increase, that means inflation. So to control the inflation, you must control the quantity money supply to stabilize the price, right? And therefore stabilize the economy. Initially, it can be done by using gold certificate, with paper money redeemable in gold, right? The government will very quantity of gold bullion, so to take the paper. So in another word, mean this one more like your open market operation, right? You the gold certificate. Example here, you give example, but it will be a bit confusing, right? Because use the old mechanism, right? But then after the crash of 1929, Fisher come to believe that the fluctuation in demand deposit are the greatest cause of business fluctuation. So here, you notice that the money supply MV, actually Fisher break it into two. One is the quantity money and one is a demand deposit. Demand deposit means a more liquid form, right, of the money supply. So to stabilize the purchasing power of the dollar, the currency commission would be required to buy securities and index below the official par. So again, it's like the open market operation, right? You have buy government securities and sell government securities, right? This one, the concept has been advocated by Fisher long time ago. Right?